Hey people, welcome to the Run Testers. It's Kieran here, and today we've got a bit of a different video for you because this video actually is all about you guys. Now, every day on the channel we get hundreds of questions from you guys asking some very specific things about the products that we've tested, or about two products perhaps that you want to have compared, asking for quite detailed advice about what you should buy next. And obviously, being the Run Testers, that's what we're all about. We want to help you guys find the kit that really works for you. Our big problem basically is because we're four journalists and we're doing this kind of as our sort of side job, is getting to all those questions and giving you some meaningful answers. Now, this video is the first that we'll have done where we've picked some questions from the community that we haven't gotten to yet. We also thought this would be a great time to let you know that we have set ourselves up on Wrinkle, who have partnered with us to create this video. It's a new service that lets you guys speak directly to us, ask us questions that you might have that are a little bit more, you know, you want a detailed answer, you want a little bit more information than we might be able to give you in a comment below. So Wrinkle lets creators like us have a one-to-one conversation directly with you to give you advice, expert tips, and also answer some of your more specific questions that might be a little bit more detailed than we're able to get to in the comments below. So the whole thing is really simple. You can basically send us a video, ask us a question, we will give you a personalised response up to 10 minutes for a small fee. So that small fee will actually also go towards helping us keep the main YouTube channel running, keeping those reviews coming thick and fast. So we thought, what better way to show you the kind of replies that you might be able to get through Wrinkle than to pull some of those questions out and answer them direct right now. So without further ado, here are some of your questions from the community answered by the Run Testers.
So one question we got from someone on the channel was from KCC, and the question was, what is the best Nike Pegasus Turbo alternative from other companies? Obviously the Pegasus Turbo is a much loved shoe, including by us, that Nike seems to have discontinued. Really its strength was the fact it was a great all-rounder shoe. You could use it for everything. It was really comfortable but still had a lot of pace. It cost around 160 quid. I'm going to dive into a few alternatives that I think are available now for less than that money. Starting with a shoe I have mentioned before many times, the Saucony Endorphin Speed. This is simply the best do-it-all trainer out there, I think, at the moment. I've done over 500k in the shoe, including lots of long, easy runs, some fast stuff, right down to, you know, track sessions and even a 5k race. This shoe has performed brilliantly for all of them. It has Saucony's PEBA-based Power Run PB foam plus a nylon plate in the midsole, which means it's kind of soft enough to do all your training in, but still really responsive and fast. Just a great all-round shoe, best all shoe out there. You can stop the video now if you see it's available. It's a great Nike Pegasus Turbo replacement, in my opinion. Another shoe I absolutely love that I think fits a similar bill is the Hoka on a Mach 4. This is a fair bit cheaper than the other two shoes. It's £125. This is kind of more at the comfort end of the scale when it comes to do-it-all shoes. It's got, you know, a really big slab of foam here. It's an EVA foam. It's really soft. Offers a really nice ride and roll through the kind of foot strike, but it doesn't lack in speed. Again, I've done some hard, speedy sessions in the shoe. I've done a 20-mile effort in it, and I found it really comfortable and it just, you know, great for all kinds of running. It's probably softer and more comfortable than the Speed, which might bring it a little bit more towards the Pegasus Turbo feel for some people. But yeah, a great do-it-all shoe. One concern I have with it is durability. The outsole's quite exposed in terms of, you know, it's a lot of just foam here. It's a rubberized outsole. Might not hold up as well, whereas the Pegasus Turbo was a shoe that I was able to put a lot of, you know, kind of at least kind of 1000k on without it, you know, falling apart. Next up, I want to talk about a couple of shoes from Puma, actually, who's come back into running in a big way this year with a really nice lineup of shoes that use their Nitro foam, which is a nitrogen-infused EVA. It actually offers really quite a nice soft ride, but there's plenty of bounce and rebound in there. It's a really responsive foam. The first shoe to mention is the Deviate Nitro. Now, this has a carbon plate. It's a really good shoe that offers a nice ride. You know, it's really fast. I've done, again, some very fast track work in it for me. But I've been able to plod along in it quite happily as well. It costs £140, so there's a big kind of Achilles heel of the shoe, which is actually the heel, in that this design here seems to cause a lot of rubbing problems. So my fellow run tester Kieran had his heel kind of ripped to shreds within like a few miles when we're in the Deviant Nitro. I can feel it on the run. It is loose back here. I've had one run where I had to turn back and change the shoe. I can't really use it day to day, which is why I think probably isn't a fantastic alternative to the Pegasus Turbo, which you could just use day in, day out. So that's why I also want to mention the Puma Velocity Nitro. Now this is an absolutely stupendous value shoe. It comes in under £100. I actually think it's pretty much got just as much pace as the Deviate Nitro, despite the lack of a plate, just because this nitrogen-infused foam is so good. Again, I've done a lot of good running in the shoe, including like some very long marathon sessions with like kind of long spells, kind of marathon pace or close to marathon pace. Still got the speed there. despite the fact that it's kind of billed more as a kind of an easy everyday trainer shoe, I think it's a nice option if you are looking for a kind of cheaper alternative when it comes to Nike Pegasus Turbo. I use this shoe for all the kind of runs I used the Pegasus Turbo for myself, and found it kind of could perform just as well really as that shoe with no heel issues. It's got a much more padded heel than the DV8 Nitro. It removes that issue which kind of really has scuppered the Puma DV8 Nitro for a lot of runners, I fear. Last shoe I'm going to talk about here is the New Balance Fuel Cell Rebel V2. Now, this is a really light shoe. It's kind of around 200 grams in my UK9, which is kind of racing shoe weight. However, you can see it's got a big stack of foam here, which is New Balance's fuel cell foam. It is soft, it is springy, you can see how squidgy it is almost, but it hasn't got a carbon plate or anything in there. So you end up with kind of a light, soft, cushy shoe, but because it's so light, it has got a high rebound foam. You can do fast stuff in it. Now, I am going to say this isn't my favourite shoe in the world. Of the ones I've mentioned here, it's probably my least favourite. I'm just testing it at the moment, and I found that it doesn't have as nice a ride. However, I know a lot of other people do really rate this shoe, and it is great value at £120 for what is a lightweight shoe that is still soft enough and kind of cushy enough to do all your kind of general training in. But because it's so light and it's got that high rebound foam, you can do fast stuff in it. Again, I took it to a session actually on the track with the Puma DV8 Nitro, and it performed pretty well over kind of 2K and 400 meter reps. It does still have that kind of do-it-all ability, which is what I really rated the Pegasus Turbo for. So yeah, that's just one last option there, the New Balance Fuel Cell Rebel V2.
We've had a question from Ross, and he says, for general long runs that aren't very slow, but more steady than easy, what would you prefer? The Nike ZoomX Invincible or the ASICS Novablast? It's a good question, and it's one that many people have probably come across when they're looking for a soft cushioned shoe. But it's actually quite an easy one to answer, and for us, we pretty much always go for the Novablast when it comes to anything that's not a slow, long recovery run. If you want to pick up the pace a bit more and you want to have that ability to run a bit faster at a steady pace, the Novablast is far better. The reason for that? Well, first of all, the foam in both of these shoes is quite similar. The ZoomX is the same foam that's used in the Vaporfly and the Alphafly. It's very soft, it's very cushioned, and it's also very bouncy. The FF Blast in the Novablast is also quite cushioned and soft, but it's a little bit more responsive and a little bit harder. And it's just a bit more conducive to running faster. What you'll find is in running in these two shoes is this kind of propels you forward quite a lot, and you kind of feel you can pick up the pace. Whereas the Invincible Run, it just feels soft, like it's deadening every step you're placing. It's a really nice feeling, and it's great for recovery runs. But if you want to run a lot faster, it's not the best shoe. It will allow you to do it to an extent. It is bouncy, but it's just not designed for running for longer periods at speed. So I would always use this for anything where I'm going out for a faster pace run, anything up to maybe a tempo run. I've not used this for races, and the reason for that is that it's a little bit unstable. Both of the foams used in these shoes is quite unstable foam. You can see here that the Nike have got around that by adding this really thick base at the bottom of the shoe to kind of hold it in place, as well as a little bit of plastic at the top. The Novablast, although it has quite an unstable foam, it's also quite a thin shoe, so it just doesn't have. It just feels a bit wobbly when you're running in it. But overall, there's a lot more versatility in the Novablast. It's a suitable shoe for doing comfortable, slow, cushioned runs, or you can use it for much faster runs, and it does feel quite choppy, like you can pick up the pace nicely. The Invincible Run, such a brilliant, comfortable shoe, great for recovery runs and longer runs where you don't care about the time, but not really designed for picking up the pace and running at a consistent speed for any time. The other thing to note as well is that the Nike Invincible Run comes in at around £160 in the UK, whereas the Novablast comes in at £130. So quite a big saving there. Well worth looking at that if it's a cost option that you're worried about as well.
So next up, we've got a question from Josephine Bennett, who asks whether or not the Aftershokz Openmove or the Aftershokz Aeropex are the most comfortable headphones. Now, Josephine, to be honest, when it comes to these bone conductors, there's not an awful lot to choose between them, but we get the question because the Aftershokz Aeropex are $149.95 versus the Openmove, which come in at $79.95. So there's a big difference here, and if you can get away with the comfort of the Openmove, then yeah, surely go for those. So here's what we found. So basically the Aeropex are a little bit lighter. They're 26 grams versus the 29 of the Openmove. and they are a little bit finer in terms of the bands, and there's a little bit more of a soft silicone feel to the overall build quality of those headphones. So the answer really is yes, the Aeropex are more comfortable, but really it's about whether or not they are £70 more comfortable. Before we get into that, here are a few other things that you want to take into consideration when you're thinking about these two sets of headphones. Number one is that the battery life of the Aeropex is 2 hours longer than the Openmove, so you're going to get 8 hours versus 6 on the Openmove. The Aeropex also has a more recent, better, upgraded version of the bone conduction technology, so the sound quality is ever so slightly better. So the other thing that you're going to swap for that 70 odd pounds by going for the Openmove is a little bit of durability and protection. Now the ingress protection rating, that's the IP rating of the Aeropex, is IP67. The Openmove is IP55. What that means is the Aeropex can be submerged in 1 metre of water, whereas the Openmove can basically have jets of water fired at them. So what we're really talking about here is that you can drop the Aeropex probably in a puddle and have it slightly submerged, whereas the Openmove really will only survive kind of sweat and rain and those kind of external kind of factors like that. The Aeropex are also protected for sort of total dust ingress, so they're supposed to keep out any dust, whereas the Openmove aren't quite as protected. They'll keep out some, not all. Back to that central question of comfort then. Well, there really isn't a huge amount to choose between these two. Yes, the Aeropex are slightly lighter, but we wouldn't really make a choice between these two based on comfort alone. And I think our take really from the run testers would be this. If you're going to be wearing these bone conductors day in, day out, using them a lot on your runs, then the extra features that you get from the Aeropex might be worth that extra upgrade. Just for the comfort, the battery life, and the sound quality, the whole package is probably maybe worth it if that's what you're going to be relying on and you want to have an enjoyable experience. If you're on a tight budget, or you're only using these for a race condition or sort of intermittently every now and again, then I think really, to be honest, the comfort won't really be that noticeable, and you can probably get away with spending £70 less and going for the Openmove.
So we've got a question from Rakshit Kumar who asked, Garmin Forerunner 245, Coros Pace 2, which one should he go for? Now, the key thing to say here is that both of these watches are very impressive. They kind of perform well in our testing. I spent a lot of time with these two watches, so I can say kind of definitively these are very good running watch options at this price point. But there are a few areas that they kind of differ that might sway you going for one over the other. I think the first main one is if you want a more smartwatch style experience, you're going to get that on the Forerunner 245 Music, because there's a non-music version as well. That means you're going to get a built-in music player, you're going to get notifications, and if you use an Android phone, you can respond to your notifications. If you've got an iPhone, you can see them, just can't respond to them. You've got payments, you've got access to Garmin's Connect IQ store, so you can get some apps and data fields and watch faces to add to the watch. Now on the Pace 2, you are only getting notifications really as its kind of main smartwatch kind of features. Again, you can't respond to those notifications, it's just there to see them. But outside of that, it's very much a focus on the kind of sports and running tracking features that they've got on this watch. The other area I think worth talking about is navigation. So with the Forerunner 245, you are getting breadcrumb real-time navigation, so you can kind of follow a little route on your watch. It's obviously not the full mapping you get on kind of more expensive Garmin watches, but you do have that ability to have those navigation features. On the Coros, you don't have that, so that's another feature that might sway you to go for the Garmin over the Coros. One thing I think is in the favour of the Pace 2 is battery life. So we're talking battery life in terms of standby time, the kind of general day-to-day use, and then also GPS battery life, so when you're out tracking. On the Coros Pace 2, you've got bigger numbers on that front compared to the Garmin Forerunner 245. It holds up better in terms of the GPS. It's going to get you longer than probably a week of training, whereas the Forerunner 245 is probably better suited for kind of a week's worth of training. And then there's standby time, where the Pace 2 seems to kind of hold up a little bit better in terms of that in between the time of you tracking your runs, probably because there's less going on in terms of the smartwatch features and the kind of things it's monitoring. But in terms of that kind of the kind of general design and the run tracking performance. So similar materials in the design, there's no touchscreen displays, so it's all kind of physical button kind of navigation. The straps are removable, you've got backlights, kind of the UI is kind of, you know, pretty easy to get to grips with. In terms of that run tracking experience, I think things like GPS tracking is pretty accurate and pretty much on par with the two watches. Heart rate monitoring, good for kind of steady runs, but if you're doing high intensity stuff, you can pair an external monitor to both of these watches. Some software features to highlight, they both work with Strava, so you can send your data to both. You've got things like interval training and workouts that you can kind of build onto the watch to kind of follow. So there's a lot here in these watches that make them really solid options. I think the thing that you would go for on the Forerunner 245 are the extra smartwatch features, the navigation elements as well. On the Pace 2, another solid watch, really good, cheaper. You're getting that bigger battery life. I think you're getting a bigger emphasis on that run tracking data and that kind of those features built around running and other sports. So those are the key things to look at choosing between the Garmin Forerunner 245 and the Coros Pace 2.
Our next question then comes from Charlie Edwards, who asks us, Garmin Forerunner 245 or the 645, and that they've seen the Forerunner 645 for £200, which is a really big kind of knockdown on the overall price tag there. Now, Charlie, this is a difficult. There's not a huge amount to choose between these two watches, really, when it comes down to it. One of the big things is the design, the casing. So the 245 is lighter, it's more plastic basically than the stainless steel casing that you're going to get from the 645. So there is a different kind of build quality there. But then things get really interesting because the 245 actually outperforms the 645 in a few key areas. Number one is battery life. You're going to get a longer battery life on the 245 than you will on the 645. 10 hours better, in fact, on the 245. When it comes to the nitty-gritty of the running features, these are essentially the same watch. You're going to get the same run tracking, training analysis skills in the main across both watches, so there's not much to choose between them. There's a few things here again that you actually get on the 245 that you don't get on the 645. One of them are the safety features, so you'll get incident alerts that you don't get on the 645. You're also going to get Pace Pro on the 245. Interestingly, that is not on the 645. Flip it the other way, if you hit the trails a lot and you're out and you're looking to do if elevation, climbing and descending is important to you, then you don't get elevation profile or vertical speed, those two key readings on the 245. You do get them on the 645. So potentially, if you're more of a trail runner, those kind of things are important to you, then the 645 is going to be the one to go for. But the Run Testers verdict really on this, the 245 was our Run Testers best pick budget running watch that we chose out. It's a real popular among the team here. And we think, you know, if you can get that at a price that's cheaper than the 645, you're essentially getting as good, if not a better watch here. The 645 we'd probably only recommend if you were going to hit the trails. Or you can get the 645 cheaper than the 245, and that loss in overall kind of GPS battery life doesn't bother you. And it's also worth saying that you're probably seeing those knockdown prices that we're kind of due a new upgrade to the 645 sometime soon. So there you have it. There are some answers to some of the questions that we've had recently from you guys out there in the community. Now, if you've got something that you're wrestling with when it comes to running gear, you're not sure which way to go on a pair of shoes, there's something you want to know if one of the watches does it or not, head over to Wrinkle, ask us a question on video and we will endeavour to answer it. We're open to all kinds of questions. If it relates to running gear, you want to know which way to jump on a piece of running gear to make you run happier or run better, then Wrinkle is open for you and we would love to hear from you. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and we will hope to see you again soon on the Run Testers.